evening, everyone. It looks like we've probably got about 400 people here in the room. I want to welcome you. I'd also like to welcome all of the viewers who are seeing this on the internet for the first time. This is BCC Live Webcast. They've picked this event to experiment with their webcast program. I want to thank the Attorney General, Andrew Cuomo, for providing staff from his Binghamton office for this forum. I'd like to thank Broome Community College for providing the space, to Doug Garner for the Civic Engagement Center, and Rich David, the Public Affairs Officer, for his assistance. I also bring greetings from Assemblyman Cliff Crouch, who could not be here this evening. We're in Cliff's district, and many of you are living in Cliff's district as well. He and I have worked very closely on this issue, and will continue to do so. He is a very, very important resource for many of us. Also, I want to introduce the panel. We have Dennis McCabe. Dennis is the Assistant Attorney General in charge in the Binghamton office. We have Mike Danaher, Assistant Attorney General. We have Roberto Barbosa, also Assistant Attorney General, and Lindsay Wickham, Field Advisor for the New York State Farm Bureau. Before I turn it over to Dennis, I want to give you a very brief environmental update. As many of you know, I serve on the Environmental Conservation Committee. I'm deeply committed to the environment, and many of the pieces of legislation that I am involved in involve environmental conservation. So many of you know that the governor has issued a directive. Now, I want to read you just 2 sentences from the governor's directive on the environmental side of the equation. He says, I am directing DEC to initiate a formal public process to update the generic environmental impact statement that is applicable to all oil and gas drilling to ensure that it is suitable to address potential new environmental impacts from drilling, including horizontal drilling in the Marcellus Shale formations. Now, what this is going to involve are 2 sets of public hearings. The first set of public hearings will convene, we think, next month. And I have requested that one of the first set of hearings be held here in Broome County. In fact, Broome Community College has offered to have one of the hearings here. Those are called scoping hearings. What that means is that you will have a chance to come to the scoping hearing and tell the DEC, the Department of Environmental Conservation, what you think should be in these new supplemental environmental impact statements. That is what's going to help us with the drilling permit process. Then, after a series of these scoping hearings, they're going to come back and say, we've listened to you, this is what we think should be in the supplemental regulations, and you'll have a chance to review what they've done with all of your ideas. And then you'll get a chance to comment on that. So there'll be a couple of opportunities to have input, and then to see how the DEC has taken your input and turned it back into this new approach to the drilling. And again, I will make every effort to get that second round here as well. Why not? This is one of the center places for this gas drilling. There's also going to be an environmental conservation assembly hearing on October 15th, and that will be in Albany. And some key representatives from your groups will be invited to provide testimony, and we're also accepting written testimony, and I would highly encourage you to do that. And if you have any questions, please contact my office or Cliff Crouch's office for the details on that. I just want to assure you, and I say this with all honesty and due respect, there is cooperation at every level of government on this topic. Senators Schumer and Clinton, Congressman Hinchey, our Curie, the county executive, all of the municipal leaders, not to mention all of my Senate and Assembly colleagues, the Attorney General, even the Comptroller's Office is highly involved in this topic. We want to make sure that this is not only done in the most environmentally friendly way, but in a way that benefits all of you. We're not trying to put a halt on this. We understand the economic values this brings to our community, but we want to make sure that our roads and our infrastructure is protected, that our water supply is safe, that our air quality remains the same, and that you can derive the benefits from this resource that we sit on. At the same time, we can also anticipate whatever concerns our environment may have and our communities in general. So with that in mind, I'd like to introduce Dennis McCabe, again, the Assistant Attorney General in charge for the Binghamton region. What we'll be doing is there'll be short presentations, and then we are going to stay here for as long as you have questions. won't be some artificial time frame where we're just going to cut off the questioning. If we see that the questions are becoming repetitive, we may try to guide you through that. And I might also add that we are learning as we go. We have learned one thing from those public forums, as Lindsay can tell you. Many of the questions that you raised prompted us to go back to Albany, to go back to our colleagues and say, we didn't have the answers to this, and we're going to need to do something about it. So it's very possible that you're going to raise a question here tonight they may not have an answer to. But that means we're all coming together to find out where these loopholes are or where these concerns are that need to be addressed. So, you know, these guys have a lot of experience in this, but you may hit on an area that we are going to need to do additional research for you. So with that in mind, I'd like to introduce Dennis McCabe. Dennis?
On behalf of Attorney General Andrew Cuomo, I want to thank our Assemblywoman Donna Lupardo for putting this forum together, and also for the great leadership that she has brought to Albany. Not only this issue, but so many issues affecting us here in the Southern Tier. Thanks to Doug Gardner out there at BCC, Rich David, for everything that you've done to accommodate us, to make our visit here so welcome, and everyone with the Broome County Center for Civic Engagement for co-sponsoring this event, and to Lindsay Wickham and the Farm Bureau for the leadership that you've provided on this issue. Let me just briefly introduce to you and give you a little background on some of the members of the Attorney General staff that have joined us tonight. Donna's introduced you to Michael Danaher, but I want you to know that Mike Danaher he concentrates on public advocacy work. And this subject of oil and gas work is very much at the heart of the public advocacy work that the Attorney General wants us to focus on. Assistant Attorney General Roberto Barbosa, he's also with the Binghamton Regional Office. Prior to Roberto coming to our office, in addition to his private practice work, he served as a regulatory officer with the United States Army Corps of Engineers. He's got an engineering background, and it's been that kind of a background and in the regulation process and his civil engineering background that we've tapped into his knowledge to really educate us in the Binghamton region and throughout the Attorney General's office on this subject matter. And coming down from our Environmental Protection Bureau is Jeremy Magliaro. Jeremy, would you stand up? Jeremy some of you may remember Jeremy from his past days. A few years back, he was with the Broome County Environmental Management Council. So Jeremy has a strong interest in this area. And I thank you, Jeremy, for joining us and for welcome back to Broome County. There are so many others from the Attorney General's staff that are here this evening, and at the end, I won't go through their names, but I can tell you that they're available to you. We've got some staff over there on a table with complaint forms. If at the end of this event you want to fill out or take a complaint form home with you, or you want to consult with a member from the Attorney General staff, the Attorney General staff will be available to you over just to the right of the exit as you would leave the building. So thank my colleagues from the Attorney General staff. But most of all, thank you all for coming out. I know there's many, many things you could be doing tonight, but we appreciate that you come to share with us your knowledge, your concerns, because it's so important. We want to share our knowledge with you, but we want to take your concerns and your knowledge, your experience back to Albany. So that our state legislators, our regulators in Albany can have a sense of what's important in the Southern Tier, what's important to you. So thank you for taking your time and for being motivated to come out this evening. Speaking of motivation, anytime I talk to an audience, I try to figure out what brings them out. Why'd you leave the comfort of your home tonight to join us tonight? One of my favorite stories about motivation is my daughter Megan lost her contact lens in our kitchen. She looked and looked and looked, and she probably spent about an hour and a half looking for that lens until she finally came downstairs into our family room and she said, "Dad, I just can't find it." And I suspect there are other parents that have a similar experience to mine. I went up into that kitchen, and within 5 minutes, I found that contact lens. And Meg said, "I don't understand, Dad. I looked every place for that." And I said, "The difference, Meg, is you were looking for a little piece of plastic, and I was looking for $200. It's really what gets you going, what motivates you. And I can tell you that every week, if not daily, the Attorney General sits down with his executive staff, and what they do is they sit around a table and they talk about issues that impact New Yorkers every day, and how the Attorney General's staff can be of assistance on those everyday issues, how we can be a positive influence to improve the quality of life for New Yorkers. This is what has motivated Attorney General Cuomo day in and day out. That's why he's focused his attention and that of his staff on such issues that you've seen so much about recently: health care, workers' rights, civil rights, environmental protection, protection of students through the comprehensive reform of the student lending industry, getting internet service providers to block access to child pornography sites, consumer protection, and of course the issue that we're focusing so much on tonight, protection of landowners' rights with respect to oil and gas leases. Our office has been participating in a series of public forums on this subject matter. First in Chemung County, then in Shenango and Sullivan counties, and now in Broome County. In early October, we will be participating in another similar event in Madison County, and there will be many, many more. We know from our participation in these forums, both before and what we can anticipate tonight and out into the future, as well as our everyday discussion with people in our community, that there are a wide variety of opinions and emotions on this issue. We know that is likely true in this gymnasium tonight. We know that there's some very strongly held views on all sides of this issue, on all sides of the gas exploration issue. And really, why wouldn't there be strong views? It's your property. It's where you live every day. And it is, even if the gas lease isn't particularly on your property, it's the community that you live in. So we fully understand the strength of your convictions, the strength of your opinions, and we hope you understand too that we live in this community and value this community and the protection of this community and the protection of landowners in this community. Let me share with you briefly how the industry has grown in New York State over the last few years. In 2004, I testified at a hearing being conducted in Elmira by the New York State Assembly Environmental Conservation Committee. The committee at that time was considering major amendments to Article 23 of the Environmental Conservation Law, which deals with mineral resources. It's the major piece of legislation in New York on this subject matter. And during a portion of my testimony, I cited a report from the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation that stated that the total market value of oil and gas production in New York State for the year 2003 was $232 million, with landowners receiving an estimated $29 million in production royalties. At that time, those numbers demonstrated a significant growth over the prior 5-year period. 3 years later, in 2006, the total market value was up from $232 million to $414 million, with the estimated royalties the landowners receiving increased from $29 million to $52 million. In fact, in less than 10-year period of time, the production of natural gas in New York State has more than tripled. And it is here in the southern tier that the great majority of that growth has occurred. Over the last several years, the great majority of gas production has occurred in Chemung and Steuben counties. And we know that it's coming east into Broome and into Sullivan, Delaware. In 2004, Asher Terwilliger from the Chemung County Farm Bureau, some elected officials and some residents from Chemung County contacted me about concerns they had regarding landmen and gas exploration companies. There had been a significant natural gas find in what is known as the Trenton Black River Formation. Some of the concerns raised were about alleged abusive practices employed by landmen and/or gas exploration companies in order to obtain leases. The gas exploration company doing the most work in Chemung County was Fortuna Energy. We sat down, we contacted Fortuna. We reviewed numerous of its documents and had a series of discussion with the company. Well, we shared with Fortuna the allegations that were made, and Fortuna offered its responses. Everyone agreed that landowners were entitled to be free from any abusive tactics. Fortuna agreed that its employees would abide by a standard of practice that we had proposed to make sure that landowners' rights were respected and that they would not be subject to abusive practices. Our office will be looking to bring the entire industry in compliance with a standard of practice that will protect landowners' rights, including protecting them from some of the abusive practices that have been reported to our office. We hope that the industry will look favorably upon such a standard of practice. Assemblywoman Lupardo spoke today about the upcoming hearings being conducted by the New York State Assembly Environmental Conservation Committee on the subject matter of environmental impacts of natural gas and oil drilling, as well as the upcoming public hearings that the Department of Environmental Conservation will be conducting. As Assemblywoman Lupardo stated, our focus tonight is landowners' rights with consumer protection perspective. With that said, I will turn this over to Assistant Attorney General Michael Danaher.
Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here on behalf of Attorney General Cuomo, to see such lovely faces out there, to discuss issues regarding oil and gas leases. As Dennis had mentioned and Donna had mentioned, there are many issues out there, some that we may not even be aware of. And so we're always asking people to come to us and address those issues to see what, if anything, our office can do, at the very least, to help protect others in the community for particular leasing practices. How do we get here in the first place? Natural gas leases have, as you're all aware, just exploded around our area. I can remember when I first started practicing law and I was in private practice. The only thing that we worried about with oil and gas leases is that it was a big pain in the neck because it was these old leases that we weren't sure were removed from the property, and the biggest pain was the seller of the property trying to find who the current owner of that gas lease was so they could get it removed. Nobody was drilling, nobody was taking out any oil or gas, and so it was just a big pain because we had to remove that encumbrance on the property. It's much different nowadays. Part of the reasons and part of the things that have happened that have caused such a huge interest and why we have such a huge audience here today are that the average natural gas prices have more than doubled since 2002. The average price for residences back in 2002 was about $7.89 per 1,000 cubic feet. That jumped up to last year of being a little over $13. As of June this year, the price for 1,000 cubic feet of natural gas is up to $18.31. So you can see the explosion in prices, which has resulted also in the increase in consumption of natural gas. A lot of people are converting over to natural gas. The amount of natural gas has increased by 50 billion cubic feet per year between 2002 and 2007. So just in a 5-year period of time, we've increased our consumption of natural gas by that much. Also, the technology has increased. Those of you who may be of my vintage will realize that technology has been quite a thing over the last even 10 or 15 years just with computers. Well, likewise with testing and drilling all that technology has also increased over the period of time. There's now such things as 3D seismic testing that's three-dimensional, so they can look better of what's underneath our land. They've come up with what you may have heard as horizontal drilling, where they now can, I don't know how they do it, they drill straight down and then go sideways. But as a result, it has yielded a greater crop of gas. So it's allowed gas companies to explore in formations that are deeper and wider than they ever were, and it provides much more access for the gas companies to exploit our natural resources from a technical and financial standpoint as well. And then all this further exploration and extraction has come from these formations that we didn't necessarily know about before or could not reach before. Names that you may hear, like the Trenton Black River Formation, or the now infamous Marcellus Shale Formation. Formations that we didn't have access to before, but because of technology, we are able to reach. Which has led to, as always, some good news and some bad news. And the good news is that with this pocket of gas, many additional revenues have been produced. Significant revenues for gas companies as well as landowners. And in addition, this has allowed more American-based exploration of resources that helps contribute to our reduction of our dependency on foreign sources of energy. But there is some bad news. And the bad news is that some landowners have come to us and have complained that there may have been some misleading, abusive, or fraudulent tactics undertaken by those who would be securing land leases for gas companies. The public has also expressed to us some environmental concerns. Environmental concerns about the use of water, how much water has to be used, what materials are being injected into the ground for fracturing, or what is referred to in the industry as fracking. There are items, materials that are added to the water to help when they bust open a vein to get to the natural gas that holds that vein open. And there's some concerns about what products are being used to fracture the rock. And also, as a result, what is happening with the disposal of those particular fluids after they've been used to frack a particular formation. So those are types of concerns that have been raised through us. But we want to kind of go through the basics, so everyone understands what is involved in this leasing process. Who are the people that are involved in leasing? What are they doing? What are the types of things that they should look out for? First of all, who's a landman? What is a landman? Most owners, most of you out there that may have already entered into an oil and gas lease, have been approached by a person who is a landman, who is the person that directly or indirectly represents the gas operator. And it's very important to understand that it may be directly someone who is employed by the gas company themselves, or it may be somebody who indirectly is hired, because there are companies out there that just are landmen. And the gas companies hire these landman companies to go out and secure leases for them. So the person you may be dealing with may not be from actually a gas company. It may be an agent of the gas company. And we've heard many stories about landmen. In equating landmen, I've heard to the modern day used car salesman that will tell you anything. But understand that this is not an indictment of landmen. You know, I'm a kindred spirit with a landman because I'm a lawyer. And you heard all the jokes about lawyers. And the same is true with landmen. And many landmen are hard-working, honest people as lawyers. But there's a percentage of them, a small percentage, that may be giving the rest a bad name. And the same is true with us. And what you need to do is to understand what may happen with your dealings with landmen who are out there obtaining whatever leases they can obtain on behalf of their particular clients. So you may be contacted. People have told me that they were out sitting on their front porch and somebody drove up to the front of their house and got out and introduced themselves. I'm a landman. I'm from so-and-so. I'd like to talk to you about leasing your property. They may call you on the telephone to set up an appointment. But this is the person that you're dealing with, the landman. What are they doing? What is an oil and gas lease anyway? An oil and gas lease is a written contract that grants the lessee, we got these legal terms, ors and es. A lessor is you, owners of property. The ors give away their right, transfer their right. And the the lessee, is the one who receives that right. So the lessor is the landowner, the lessee is the gas operator who wants to lease your particular property. This contract defines all the rights and obligations that you and the land company, gas company, would have, and it should be detailed in the lease. But understand that not all leases are the same, and not all leases list all of the rights. There can be many different items detailed in that lease, such as to explore. Do you have gas under your land? Do we do seismic testing on your property to see what's under there? Can we drill to pull out directly from your land and extract the gas that's on your property? Or some other form of lease. It may be that you don't want somebody to drill on your land, but they may be drilling on the land next door, and they want, with that well, that may be taking your gas. So they want to have a lease with you. So this lease can cover all types of things. But there are certain things that you really need to understand before you sign the lease. And I know that we'll be here for a little while, and you've heard a lot of things about gas leasing and read them in the newspaper and saw them on TV. But if you can walk away with one thing, hopefully you'll walk away with much more. But if you can walk away with one iota of information that take away from here is you should and must consult with your own attorney before you sign the lease. Talking to them after you sign the lease is not as effective. Oil and gas leases can be very complicated documents. Many of you out there may have signed a document, signed a lease, and when somebody handed it to you and you read the first line, your eyes rolled up in the back of your head. I can't understand this. Well, it's incumbent upon you to understand it. There are many good lawyers out there representing people that you should go to give you advice before you sign the lease. We all know, especially when you've been reading the newspaper and seeing the kind of numbers that are being thrown out there, don't be penny wise and pound foolish. Don't say, I kind of understand all the terms of this, I'll just sign here and get my check. Spend the money and get yourself proper legal counsel so that you know what your rights are and that you are sure that you are doing what you want to do. What happens after you sign the lease? And this is probably the reason why you should have gone to a lawyer to begin with, is a lease is a binding contract. It is a contract between you and the gas company, and you are bound. I have received many telephone calls. Many of you may have spoken with me on the telephone. I tried to call you all back. And one of the fundamental problems that people have said when they've called me is, I didn't get enough money. I want to find a way to get out of my lease. Your lease is a contract. Unfortunately, as much of a public advocate as I am, and my colleague Roberto and Dennis, Roberto and I have been involved in this thing intimately for the last probably 5 years. We can't get people out of leases. So please, review the contract, understand it before you sign anything. This lease document is oftentimes filed in the county clerk's office or it's either the lease itself or what they refer to as a memorandum of lease. It's just kind of a synopsis of what your lease is. Gets recorded in the clerk's office and therefore becomes a lien on your property and will impact your title. So that when I talked about starting out, 20 years ago, and one of the biggest pains for us who represented sellers was to get rid of that lease because the buyer wouldn't take it with an outstanding gas lease that may have been long gone, removed. That's because it was a cloud on the title. So you really need to know that this lease that you signed will have long-term implications, just even on the title of your property, because it's an encumbrance. It's a right that somebody else has to use your property. And there are certain key terms that come up when we're talking about leases. First of all is generally the leasing clause. And simply that is the general terms that the landowner, lessor, is granting to the lessee, the gas company, the right to have access to their property for the purpose of extracting oil and gas and any other constituents. That's a common phrase that's used. The right to access and extract oil, gas, and their constituents, and all exclusive rights needed to explore, develop, produce, measure, and market production. That's a big general phrase, and with that particular phrase, you are giving them unlimited interest to anything under your property. This includes the right to conduct exploratory tests, seismic, that sort of thing, drill wells, use and install roads on your property so they can get to where they're drilling. So it has a major impact on your property. And that's kind of the general leasing clause. There's also the leasing term. In actuality, there are a couple of terms that are included in your lease. The primary term and what oftentimes people don't realize, the secondary term. And the primary term is usually a term for a specific period of time, 5 years, 10 years. You lease the property for that period of time to the gas company, which they can use and explore, extract gas, natural gas. Well, many leases also contain a secondary term. And that secondary term, in essence, extends the primary term, which could be indefinitely, which often it is a term for 5 years, let's say, and for so long as we continue to extract natural gas. So if they stick the straw in the ground within that 5-year period of time, they will have a lease for as long as they extract the gas. And also as a secondary term, I have seen, in essence, option terms, which means 5 years, and people think, oh, I signed a 5-year lease, because that's what's presented to them. I signed a 5-year lease. Well, they didn't keep reading. And it says the gas company also has an option to lease for an additional 5 years if I simply pay to you the same price I paid originally. So for those of you that may have signed a lease 5 years ago when prices were very low, you may have that when you thought your lease was coming to an end, there may be a provision in there that by simply paying you however much per acre, that it can be extended for another 5 years. And again, if the well gets put in the land within that period of time, it would go on for as long as gas is being extracted. The bonus payment clause. The bonus payment clause is simply a monetary amount that will be paid to you just for signing the lease. This is the number that has really gotten huge. 6 months ago, it might have been $50 an acre, $100 an acre. Frequently, it could be a lump sum of X number of dollars, or it could be an amount per acre, and I frequently see it's amount per acre. I'm sure the reason why many of you are here is you saw some of the numbers that are now showing up in the newspaper of people that have signed and are getting that initial bonus of $2,500 an acre, $3,000 an acre, or more sometimes. In other parts of the country, it's significantly more than that. And a lot of times, people focus on that bonus payment. And they say, I should be getting $2,500 an acre. I should be getting $3,000 an acre. And they disregard everything else. Another thing that you can take away from here that I want to encourage you to not have happen to you is don't be blinded by the dollar signs. Some of these numbers we're hearing are huge. My good friend Asher Terwilliger is here. I was just talking to Asher this morning on the telephone. He's from the Farm Bureau. I've been dealing with him for years out in Chemung County, and he's been at the forefront of this. And he told me this morning a story about somebody who recently signed, and he was able to help them. An older farmer, had a lot of acreage, may have had some problems trying to finance taxes and everything on his property, that he was able to work out where the ultimate payment that the gentleman received was somewhere in the neighborhood, because he owned a lot of land, of $1 million. But don't be blinded by the dollar signs. There's many other things associated with the lease that you yourselves have to be careful of. But the bonus payment is simply a charge that's an amount that's paid to you up front for the leasing of your property. Another term that you hear is the royalty payment, and that is a percentage of the money that the gas company receives for selling the gas under your land. So you get the upfront bonus payment, and you have the royalty payment, and that is based on your property, how much of your acres fit into the entire unit itself. You get a proportionate, it's proportionally spread out, and you get a percentage. We're hearing all types of percentages. If you signed a lease 6 months ago, it was probably 1/8, which is 12.5%. But those numbers are also changing. And for those of you who are mostly focused on that big dollar figure on the bonus payment, I tell you that a small percentage increase in the bonus or in the royalty payment could be much more significant than the amount of the bonus payment that you're being paid. So another thing that you need to consider. Those are the kind of terms that you will see when you're reviewing the lease. Well, my talk here to you today is to give you what our collective experience has been with the kind of problems that have occurred when people were out signing leases. We have a couple of kind of misleading or misunderstood. It doesn't even have to be misleading. It could be the landowners have misunderstood what is being said to them when they're being approached by a gas landman. For example, you're told your property will or won't be made part of the spacing unit if you don't sign a lease. We're going to cut you out. Well, just to give you some background, what happens is that your property, your little piece, even if it's as little as 100 acres, may still not be the part of the big unit. There may be 600 acres in the unit, and you may only be a portion of that. And they'll come knocking on your door and say, you don't sign this lease, we'll just cut you out and everybody else will get it. That is untrue. That is misleading. It's the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation that determines what the unit is. It's not the landman, it's not the gas company that determines the unit. The landman can let you know that your property may be in a proposed unit that has been submitted to the DEC, but you can't arbitrarily get cut out based upon the science, and maybe I'm not smart enough to figure out how they do that, all that 3D seismic testing and everything. But they do testing, and the science is getting much better, and they can kind of determine where that pocket or unit of gas is, and that pocket is what's submitted to the DEC, and the DEC determines whether you're in the unit or not somebody else. So don't let somebody lead you to believe that. Another one is, this paper I'm handing you, this lease, this complicated document, that's a standard lease. Standard lease, it's not negotiable, it's uniform in the industry, and it's not negotiable. There is no such thing as a standard lease. An oil and gas lease is a contract, and a contract is negotiable. So except for the items that are required to be in your lease by law, such as you are required to have a 3-day right to cancel, that can't be negotiated out. The law requires that be in there. Unless the law requires that it be in there, all of the other terms are negotiable. Now, I'm not saying that a gas company that approaches you is going to say, we're not going to negotiate that point, we're firm on that. Well, you keep trying to negotiate, and maybe you can convince them otherwise, or you may be at a point where that won't be negotiated any further, but it is a negotiable point. Another item that you sometimes will hear is all your neighbors have signed, and you're the only person that's holding all these vast riches from all your neighbors. That's rarely the case. Because you have to understand that in order for a gas company to actually be able to start drilling in a particular unit, they must have locked up 60% of the property in leases. They must have 60% of the property under their control in a spacing unit in order to drill. And if you happen to be the owner of that 60%, and all the 40 other percent of the unit has signed and you haven't, well, I guess maybe you are holding up. But I still say that shouldn't deter you from getting the best deal possible that you can get. But as a precaution, talk to your neighbors. See if that's really true. Many people have called us and have said, you know, I signed the lease because the landman said, hey, you're holding everything up and, you know, we need to have you sign. Well, after I signed, I went out and started talking to my neighbors and nobody signed. So you need to check those things ahead of time. Another item is, don't you want to receive X number of dollars a month? Couldn't you use an X dollars a month in income when we start drilling? So just sign here. The amount of money that you receive as a royalty depends on many, many different factors. It varies from day to day. People who have signed leases may get a lot of money at the beginning, and then it may slow down as the gas is extracted. And therefore, there is no landman that can tell you or give you a reasonable estimate of the amount of money that you're going to make each month from the gas that's sold on your property. The landman can give you an example to show you how they calculate royalties. But understand, when they show you those numbers, it's merely for demonstration purposes and only for the purpose of describing how your royalty will be calculated. So you really have to disregard the number that they're using and just focus on the formula that they're using. Number 5, one that we've talked a little bit about already, is if you don't sign, we're going to take the gas anyway, so you might as well sign. That is not true. New York State does not allow that. Even if you are not the piece of property that the well is located on, you may be the neighboring property, but your gas is coming out of that well, you will be paid for it. Now, you don't have to sign a lease even to get that. If your land is located in that unit, you will share in the royalties, whether you sign a lease or not. One thing that people have told me is they've said, the landman came up to me and said, if I don't sign the lease, then I'm going to miss out on the money. And I'm telling you that that is only partially true, because what happens is if you don't sign a lease, what can happen is, you know, we talked about if they get 60% of the unit, they can actually start drilling. And if you don't sign a lease, they can go to what is called compulsory integration. They can compulsorily integrated you into that unit to where you didn't sign a lease, but a determination was made that an extraction will take place and they're going to use your gas. But the unit hearing is for the purpose of making a determination as how much do you get. So there will even be a hearing for you to get your royalties even though you haven't signed a lease. So if somebody says to you, we're going to take it anyway and you're not going to get a dime, you're not going to get a bonus payment. Bonus payment is the one up front. But you will get paid for the extraction of your gas. There are some problems, and again, it isn't universal with all landmen, but there have been some problems that have been brought to our attention that I want to pass along to you. Because I do this for a selfish reason. I can't tell you the number of phone calls that I've received over the last few months from people. I'm constantly on the telephone. So I'm being selfish, because this may save a lot of telephone calls for me later on if you're already aware of what you need to do to protect yourself. And here's some of the things. We've heard anecdotal information about different pressure tactics that landmen have brought to bear upon landowners. Understand, it's your property. Dennis mentioned it to you. It's your property. You have the right to decide who can come on your land, who can contact you, and how they can contact you. Do not be bullied into signing a lease. Don't allow it to happen to you. I want you to sign a lease if that's what you want to do. I want you to sign a lease that's in the best interest of you, and the only way you're going to do that is if you become aware of what your rights are. If you're feeling under pressure, there's some things that you should consider. One, you think, this person's being someone who I don't want to talk to. Please get off my land. You may be somebody that is not interested whatsoever in leasing your property. You just don't want to do it. Try to obtain the name and address and telephone number of the landman. And as I mentioned, the landman may be a third-party landman that's hired under contract with a gas company. Find out who the landman works for, and find out the business that they are representing. Get their name. Ask the landman to leave your property if you don't want them to be there, and not return or contact you if that's what you want. Remember, it's your property. Write a letter to the landman, and write a letter to the gas company, of course keeping a copy for yourself, saying, we are requesting that you stop coming and contacting us. We don't want to hear from you. And if they persist and you have asked them not to be on your property, you may want to consider contacting law enforcement to determine whether you have any additional rights and ways that they may assist you in protecting your property. Another important thing that you really have to be aware of is, and again, all of these things are based on experience that we have seen in our office, get everything in writing. Put everything that's said to you in the written lease. There are no handshake deals anymore. The landman and many very nice, cordial, very extraordinarily smart landmen out there that want to engage you, very nice, you want to talk to them, and they may promise you something, and they may be fully truthful, but make sure it's in the lease. They may say, we can agree on that. Yeah, we'll agree on it, write it down. Include it in the lease. No, verbal promises are not going to be valid. There's a thing in New York State and in most states called the statute of frauds. And what that means is that anything involving and affecting real property must be in writing to be enforceable. So put it in the lease. Any promises, or the gas operator may not adhere to that promise. Another thing that you'd be well served in getting is always demand a copy of the lease before it's presented to the gas operator. What I say to you is if somebody comes and gives you a lease in your house and you sign, make sure before that person leaves that you have a copy of what you signed. I've heard stories that there have been documents that have been signed and there have been blanks that were left in it. The landowner did not keep a copy of it, and when it came back to them, certain blanks were filled in. And the blanks that were filled in may have been unfavorable terms. Make sure. If there's blanks, cross them out. Put NA for not applicable. If it doesn't apply to you, cross it out, or if there's anything else, add it in, and make sure you get a copy. Because that way, you also ask for a fully executed copy when the gas company signs it. Ask for a copy in return. That way, you can compare the two to make sure they're exactly what you signed. Consider negotiating things into the lease that it may be effective only after you have received a signed copy of it. I understand, I've talked to attorneys out there, and I understand that many gas companies may not be signing the leases. And then you have a fundamental problem, and that is, when is it effective? How do I know that they signed on? Yeah, you get a check, but how do I know they signed on? Well, they say, well, I don't have to sign on, and technically they may not have to. All I need is your signature on it. Maybe, I'm not telling you that it's a requirement. I'm saying it's something that you may want to consider when negotiating a lease. Negotiate in that it is not effective until you have been not only that the gas company has signed it, but you have received a copy of it. You may want to consider negotiating a term that really is only effective upon your receipt of a copy of the gas lease. There's a number of problems that occur with leases. So just to give you a few of those. One is the lease duration. Again, you need to be good consumers. A lot of people out there understand that you have consumer rights. And I speak frequently about consumer rights. But there's also something that a lot of people don't realize, and that is there are some consumer responsibilities. And we as landowners need to exercise our responsibility in becoming informed of what's going on. And so one of the things is we have to understand every term that's in there. Understand what the conditions are for the duration of the lease. Is it just a 5-year lease? Is there an option to renew? Is the lease going to continue forever as long as gas is being extracted? We don't necessarily care what it is. What we care about is that you understand what it is and that you understand what you agree to. Royalties. You should understand exactly what you receive in royalties. For example, a lease may call for an 18% royalty, 15% royalty. You should know how that is calculated. Are there expenses that are taken off the top before they calculate that percentage? How do we figure out the royalty? Is it based on everything that comes out of the well? These are things that you all need to understand. How are disputes resolved? Because in many of the leases, I bet you when you all go back home and pull out your leases and read it, many of the leases contain arbitration clauses, which means that you go to arbitration to resolve disputes rather than go to court. And you may have a significant expense in pursuing arbitration because frequently in the leases it calls for 3 arbitrators. The gas company pays for one, you pay for one, and both of you split the cost of the third in trying to arbitrate your decision. But understand that, and again, I'm not necessarily concerned what it is. What I'm concerned about is that you understand it and that you agree to it in the first place. Use of the property. Understand what your property is being used for. Do you want to have the well banging in your backyard? Or do you say, hey, look, I don't mind gas being taken out of my taken from underneath my property. I just don't want the drilling apparatus on my property. Then you negotiate that. You don't give surface rights, meaning they can't go in from your surface. You negotiate that out of the term. But again, it doesn't, some people want that. Some people may get an extra benefit by having the drilling on their property. They may want that. You may not. That's why each lease is unique, and you need to understand all of the terms. Each landowner must decide what is best for him or her in executing the lease. Here are some tips. You may have heard me say this before, but I'll say it again, and Dennis said it, and if you call me on the telephone, I'll tell you the same thing. When somebody calls me and they say, what's your advice? What should I do? Consult an attorney before you sign the lease. Review each term. Understand what your rights are before you sign the lease. Ask all the questions. Ensure that you understand all the terms, and also make sure everything comes in writing. You may even want to consider, because of environmental concerns, and I'm not an environmental expert, but I have heard of some of the possible environmental problems, testing your water before any drilling takes place. And then if something should happen with your well or anything, have it tested afterwards. That way you can equate what problems may have occurred as a result of post-drilling. Negotiate so that you may get better terms than may have been initially offered. Hey, when you go to buy a car, you don't get the best deal on the first shot. You got to negotiate. Same with land leases. You may not get the best offer at first, negotiate. And what I think is best, and I advocate this in any consumer realm, is have an idea of what you want going in, so you know where you're bargaining from. Because I can assure you, the person that you are bargaining with knows where they're coming from. Understand, and maybe you can negotiate to that point that is beneficial for you. Search for and negotiate with more than one gas operator. Competition is a wonderful thing. Competition is what has driven the prices in this area. Make sure you obtain a copy of the lease that you signed at the time that you sign it and at the time that the gas operator signs it. That agreement is what governs the entire transaction. Understand that you have 3 business days to cancel. It should be written right in the lease. And I will tell you, that is probably the 3 fastest days that will ever occur. That time passes very quickly. Your best advice is not even have to use that, because you've talked to the attorney ahead of time and you know everything that's in it, so it's everything that you want and you won't have to worry about it. But understand that even if you do sign a lease, you have 3 business days to cancel. Make sure that if you have recently signed a lease within the last 3 days, get it to your lawyer right away and make sure that's all the terms and conditions that you want. This can be a very profitable enterprise for gas companies and for you as landowners, but you have to understand your rights. Take every opportunity to learn as much as you can. There's key contact information that we have for you. You can contact our office, our 800 number that's on the screen, as well as our website. The New York State Farm Bureau, Lindsay's here representing them, a wonderful resource. I saw Brad Vickers come in a little while ago. We have Asher Twilliger. We have Lindsay Wickham from farm bureaus throughout New York State. And Lindsay being with the New York State Umbrella Farm Bureau, another valuable resource. And also our agency client of ours, the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. In fact, I was on their website today, and they have a lot of valuable information. They even have a little link at the bottom that says Marcellus Shale. And you can click on that, and there's a lot of valuable information there. I hope all of your experiences in going through and negotiating a gas lease is profitable to you, and that it's everything that you hoped it would be. So, thank you very much.
Anyone on this side of the room have a question or a comment they'd like to make?
Okay, thanks. Hi, I'm from Tioga County. I haven't heard Tioga County mentioned tonight, and certainly like to see some representation, the DEC and other state officials over in Tioga County. I'm also concerned about the substances that might be in the hydrofracking fluids, and I'm wondering if it'll be possible to get companies to disclose what is in those, both for environmental reasons and for health and public safety reasons.
She asked about fracking fluid. Now, we're going to try to keep our questions, if we could, to the landowners' rights issue, but I will answer you that this is something that's going to be part of the scoping hearings. So we're going to definitely be taking that into consideration. And I've had assurances at every level that we're going to try to find out. We're going to find out what's in the fracking fluid. And the thing is, we may not be able to learn the specific concentrations of certain chemicals because that's the proprietary, but we're going to certainly find out what's in this stuff and know, so that our EMS professionals can be prepared, so that everyone can be on board for future reference. So yes, we're definitely going to be working on that.
Lindsay, you want to follow up?
Yeah, boy, these cords are tight. Hey, just a quick note that DEC has told me that at this point, they will not grant any permits without full disclosure of what those chemicals are. So that's good news.
Can you stand up? Hi, here's a landowner's rights question. Mr. Vickers tried to touch upon the idea of saying no. Compulsory integration really only offers you a choice of saying yes or yes, doesn't it? If I'm a landowner and I don't want my property, I want my mineral rights down to the core of the earth protected, and I don't want it drilled under me, I really don't have a choice, do I?
I don't want to break the microphone, but yeah, this is pretty awkward. But that is correct. I mean, New York State, you can look at it two ways. God bless New York State or God darn New York State. But I said we are a forest pooled state, and so yeah, you really have no choice other than to be compensated for any withdrawal of your minerals. We are a state that follows the law of capture. Basically, those who get the gas own the gas, and so the protection we do have built in is that you will be compensated, because pretty much, as you can imagine, is practically impossible and improbable that you could tap into the ground and not trespass into a neighbor's property to draw some of that gas, and thus that's why we have the forest pooled. And as I told somebody who told me they wanted no part of this anyway, I said, well, if you get a royalty out of it, give it to charity, I guess. But so yeah, you're kind of stuck getting paid for the gas.
Hi, little quick comment off of hers, and then just a question. The comment is, I'm a small landowner. I've got 3 acres in Windsor, and a bunch of my friends who've lived in Windsor for, their families have been there hundreds of years. They might have 5 acres. Is the Attorney General's office going to be helping us out? Because we're landowners, but we're not looking to make money. And the problem with issues like water testing, let's take that for example. In other states where they found problems in water, and it's come up all over the place, and the aquifer has been contaminated, the oil companies has been successfully able to duck lawsuits by simply saying, you didn't give us a water test. Now, the people had tested the water, but they didn't test for the 200-some chemicals that are in the fracking fluids. And from what I heard, it's about $30,000 to do that test. I don't have $30,000 to do that test. So I guess I've got 2 questions. One is, how can we deal with that issue? And 2 is, how can you help small landowners? I love everybody who's got a lot of land, no problem with them. I want you to be happy, but we've got a community, we've got air pollution coming, we've got water pollution we might be seeing, we have a compressor being built next door maybe. We have no idea. Is there going to be anything done to help us and others in the community, like in Windsor, who own a small plot in the middle of the nice little community and aren't really going to be making money here? Thank you.
Me?
That's true. There are smaller size parcels of land, but the fundamental things that we talked about are still the same. Whether you own a large parcel, a small parcel, you have got to be a good consumer when leasing out your particular property. As far as the environmental issues go, I understand there's an expense associated with doing water tests and testing all the different chemicals. But again, we're talking about something that landowners have to understand, that maybe that's some of the bonus payment money they may have to use to do testing on their property. There is no legislation currently in New York that requires the land company to do the water testing. Maybe that's something you negotiate in the lease. Maybe you can get the land company to agree to test your water, to pay for the test of the water. Again, all the terms are negotiable, and that may be something that you want to check into.
But just along the line of your comment, though, I'm glad that we have Jeremy here from our Environmental Protection Bureau, because that's the type of comment I think needs to go back to Albany. And it's also something that our Assemblywoman has suggested, even if you can't make the hearing or not going to be testifying before the Assembly Environmental Committee in Albany on that subject matter, submit it, written, because the person who owns the small acres and would have to deal with that cost is something that really has to be brought to the attention of the Department of Environmental Conservation, the impact of that, and the importance of learning everything about what's in those fluids and making sure that the water, which is, of course, a valuable resource, just like the natural gas, is protected. So, you know, I would encourage you, as I would ask Jeremy to take it back to our Environmental Protection Bureau, to make those concerns known to DEC and to the Assembly Environment Committee. Thank you for raising the issue.
I live in the town of Binghamton, and I have spent the last 20 years of my life cultivating my property. It is a pristine piece of property, overlooks the city of Binghamton. It's absolutely stunning. It was an old farmer's field at one point. Now, I do not wish to sign any lease. I do not wish to have any drilling around me. If my neighbors sign leases, then I am subject to the 18-wheel tankers that will be coming up Park Avenue. I will be subject to the contamination that they are going to exploit when they frack these wells, because federal law does not allow these companies to divulge the chemicals that they use when they frack a mile down before they go horizontally. Some of those chemicals are very toxic, like benzene. Now, I am a cancer survivor. Why in the world would I want drilling all around me? It's absolutely crazy. I think the way we're approaching this whole thing is bad. Nobody has done it sensibly. They haven't looked into this thoroughly. Everybody just sees the carrot dangling in front of them, thinking they're going to get money up front. They don't realize they're going to have to pay taxes on that money. They don't realize that their property taxes may go up because of this. And then when these gas companies are finished raping your land, then what do you have left? You probably won't even be able to give away that land. So what are my rights as a person that does not want the drilling anywhere near her?
Yeah, I certainly handle a couple of your points. And first thing, I'll try to address some of the ones I wrote down here is talk about the roads. And this is one of the best things that ever happened in New York State was when they drilled a well up above Asher Twilliger's house last year and just obliterated his road. And I mean obliterated. The school bus couldn't go up for what, 6 weeks, Asher? You really need to work with your local municipal, town officials or whoever, county officials, to make sure they have the proper procedures in place to bond their roads, period. $1 million bond isn't out of the question. The gas companies will pay it. So that being said, now in terms of, again, just to hopefully calm some of these comments down as the night goes on, is in New York State, gas companies are required to basically double case down to at least 600 feet, as long as, to make sure they're below any aquifer potable water layers. But one of the potentials we are looking at, and this has been used where actually required under some leases in other parts of the country, are closed systems to keep all these chemicals closed so they can't be put in open pits or open to the air in any ways like that. So, that's why, we have bought this time for the next perhaps year to look at these things. Property taxes. This is a good one because Donna's heard me kind of complain to her before about this in front of a lot of people, and I'll do it again. Under New York State tax law, actually local assessors do have the option of either taxing the property owner or the gas company for any improvements due to gas exploration. At this point, I have not seen any examples of them taxing the property owner. What they do is the gas companies are required to report the information to the New York State Office of Real Property Services, who in turn assigns like an energy unit number to it and then sends it back to the local municipality to collect the taxes. Now that being said, one of the things we'd be looking at is a legislative change possibly, or a law change that would require the gas companies to make sure they take care of it. Now, the increase in property taxes is a real thing. In fact, I had a discussion last night with one of the assessors here in Broome County. What is driving this is the speculation again. We have speculators running all over the place. Broome, Shenango, Delaware, Sullivan, Otsego, Tioga, Chemung, buying up land at stupid prices. And what those stupid prices do is they go back in whenever there's a reval. They go into the equation as a comparable or like sale. And thus we see all our assessments go up, which obviously doesn't necessarily mean increased property taxes, but ultimately more than likely will. So that is something also that we need to address, and we understand that. And again, something we're working on currently, and actually in Farm Bureau right now is our policy development season, so we're looking for some guidance from our county farm bureaus. But it's all stuff that's being addressed right now. So.
One question that I have is the only recourse property owners have is basically through arbitration or to hire an attorney if there's any damage done to their property, or let's say if they have a well. Has the legislatures ever considered some type of legislation that have been passed in Pennsylvania and other states that would help protect property owners' rights? And there are laws in place. Even Pennsylvania has one. I forgot what it's called. It's like surface accommodation or something like that.
Currently, DC requires only a $2,500 bond for well site, basically for the well site, which is, in my mind, ridiculously low. So we are looking at a package. In fact, I've talked briefly with Donna about this, and as soon as I get some guidance from my counties, that we're going to be sitting down with the legislature before they get into next session and looking at some kind of package of rights. We always hate to, everybody complains about too much legislation, and we always hate to, as I say, to create legislation to protect people from themselves. But this issue is so, it's just so consuming to everybody that we will be looking at things like that.
The only way that towns could protect their roads and things like that is performance bonds. And local towns would have to pass their own legislation. I worked as a planner, so as an advisor to a planning board, they could require a performance bond for a site plan for a new development. The only time a performance came into place for a road project was if there was a mining operation in the town. But in the town that I worked in, they had a local law that also ran, I guess you would say, simultaneously, let's say with a mining permit with New York State DEC. So if the towns want to protect their property, that would be the only way, at least, that they could do is require bonds that way.
Right, well that's why I was saying is that towns need to make sure now that they have the procedures in place, because part of the disclosure part of the well permit is that all municipalities that will be affected by a drilling operation will be notified. And the unfortunate part is, I don't know if it's unfortunate, but actually this is playing out in Pennsylvania courts as we speak, is that local towns they have no jurisdiction over a well site. That is all, DEC overrides any local jurisdiction at that level.
I know that in terms of other states' legislation, that just in our discussion with the Chemung County Farm Bureau, that they have gone off to other states to talk about states that have been in the oil industry for many, many years, and reached out for their experience, what's happened in Oklahoma, what's happened in Texas, to try to bring that information back to New York. So I certainly would encourage those that have examples of legislation in other states to get that type of legislation to our Assemblywoman for consideration as they deal with this issue before the state legislature. Ashley, you had a question over here? Comment?
Yes, I've got a comment to make about the compulsory integration and spacing units. The comment was made that the DEC sets the spacing units, and I don't believe that's correct. The spacing unit is approved by the DEC when a gas company submits a well permit. Then they look at it, and if that spacing unit seems reasonable, they will approve it. With the Marcellus Shale layer, virtually every acre is capable of producing gas, and under the current system, you could have a patchwork of units. Although the DEC will not allow holes within a unit, there's nothing, to my understanding, to prevent corridors from existing between units, which could be of insufficient size to drill and be produced. Can I have your comment on that?
The DEC is ultimately the one that decides the spacing unit. The information oftentimes is presented to them, and they have people that review the data to determine whether or not that is accurate. It's their responsibility to look at all that information, and then they set what the particular unit is. But you're correct in that the information is initially given to them by the gas companies or the seismic companies that the gas companies hire to do the testing. DEC at this stage just doesn't have the ability to go out and do their own testing. They just can't do that, so they review the information that's provided to them.
Roberto?
And also to expand on that a little bit, when DEC receives the information, they also have to make sure that the boundaries of the unit have the proper setbacks and that the unit has a somewhat uniform shape. And that is the kind of determination they make when they look at the proposed unit and the data that the gas operator has collected. And if for some reason the proposed unit and the data do not match, then it's DEC's job to readjust the boundaries to make it conform with their laws and regulations.
I think we're over on this side. Doug?
I was just wondering if it's possible to do the fracking without any toxic chemicals.
Go ahead. Roberto?
It depends. It technically is possible to do the fracking without any additional chemicals, but that really is a determination made based on whatever information the gas operator has as to what the formation consists of, how deep they have to go, and how wide the fracture has to be. Over 99%, even when they add the chemicals, over 99% of the components is water and sand. But the problem is that they use the volumes of water that are used are so large that even when you have a small fraction of chemicals used, it ends up being a large amount. So the short answer is yes, it could be done, but it depends on the conditions at the site.
Dennis, I want to add one quick note to that is there is a bill that's been introduced in New York State to require non-toxic fracking fluids. It has been used in other areas, and had good results. And I suspect we'll see how our policy development plays out over the next few months, but you'll see quite a move, I think, for that during this period. Yes.
Hi, my question is for Mr. McCabe. I enjoyed your presentation. It answered a lot of questions. Do you have a website where we can print out everything you told us because we couldn't write it all down? Or will it be a handout?
We actually have handouts that were hopefully on your seat. And our website also is listed, it was listed on the screen, also on the materials that you can go there, and there's information regarding gas leasing.
My question is simply, what about from the well to the main pipeline, the transmission lines? The well is no good without a transmission line to get it to the main pipeline. What's your rights on that?
Roberto?
Yes, it's sort of a mixed jurisdiction. The well itself is regulated by New York State DEC. The construction of the pipeline from the well to the larger interstate pipelines is controlled by the New York State Department of Public Service. They are responsible for reviewing the proposed projects. And if you go to their website, they will give you a list of the proposed projects, what projects have been approved. That's a very useful resource for pipelines.
Back here.
I have two questions. One is, if you join a coalition, is the lease and the attorney adequate? And also, how do you know if a gas company is sucking gas from your well if you're not signed with a lease?
I didn't hear the question.
I'm sorry, could you restate it?
Is a coalition lease attorney adequate? If you join a coalition, is that enough, rather than having to go to another attorney?
The attorney is representing the entire group that's in the coalition.
Right. So is that enough for the individual?
Well, it's your decision as to whether, but, you know, that's one of the question we had over here from Windsor is some of the, you know, you own 3 acres of land, you team up with people and you end up with 100 acres of land, and then you're able to afford an attorney. As long as you don't have any conflicts within the group, you're all working along the same page. You know, it's when the conflicts develop that you could have a problem. If somebody wants something that somebody else in the coalition doesn't want, then you may end up having to go to a separate attorney.
Okay, my other question was, how do you know if a gas company is sucking gas from your property if you haven't joined or signed a lease with them?
That's a determination made of where the unit is, and it's determined that when you're drawing out of that particular unit, you are taking the gas from the unit of the property owners in the unit, and that everybody is paid proportionally.
Hi. On the coalition issue, we hark back to Chemung County a lot because we learned a lot initially from Chemung County. I don't remember, correct me if I'm wrong, Asher, a lot of coalitions out in Chemung County. What I was hearing were experiences of people being sort of picked off one by one. One of the beauties I think we've seen in our area is there is some strength in numbers. The companies have a lot of strength, and I'm not arguing for, you know, ideally you like to come to a bargaining table with equal strength. And that's where I think some of the coalitions help in terms of getting, one, the expense of getting to that bargaining table, and two, there is some strength in numbers. So you're dealing with a large company that's negotiating with you. You like to have the strength of your neighbors and all on the same place. So I think that's been a benefit in our community of neighbors getting together and forming, you know, getting together in a coalition. So we had, Doug's got a mic, whoever's got the mic, we're on this side with a mic.
Hi.
If you raise your hand, Doug will come to you next time.
Hi. First,
Won't you, Doug?
I wanted to thank everyone on the panel for coming this evening and reflect back something that I hear before I pose my question to you. Louder? Yeah, first I thanked everyone for coming, and I wanted to reflect back my impression of what I'm hearing before I pose the question. I live in Vestal, and I have a small piece of property, and I'm a person in general who is very concerned about the environment. I feel as if what I'm hearing is that there's been a great deal of attention given to protecting people, making their contracts, but very, very little attention given to people who don't want to participate in these contracts. And I think I'm more struck by that actually after coming here tonight than I was before that. And that really concerns me tremendously. That we have very few rights if we don't want to have a contract with one of these companies, and money is not our concern. And I don't think there's anyone looking out for us. I feel a little bit like I'm hearing things here which are very similar to what we're hearing in the news about Lehman Brothers. The corporations are getting lots of attention. The people who are trying to live simply are not getting a lot of help. So I guess my question is, I'm really interested in knowing when the oil companies, the gas companies, were given the right to do horizontal drilling. Is that something that came up only in the current federal administration?
No. What has happened is that horizontal drilling is an increase in technology. They've determined this is a way that we can drill and potentially draw more gas or minerals out of the ground. What has been allowed is drilling. You know, drilling never differentiated between vertical, horizontal, or what. It was just that they were allowed to drill. And as Lindsay mentioned, is that we have in New York State compulsory integration. And that's the way that the law is set up, that the legislature has determined many years ago that these resources are valuable resources that need to be extracted to support all of our lives. They made that determination. And so with compulsory integration, if you're in the unit, you can have your gas taken. The compulsory integration was, it used to be before you could have the gas taken and you never got paid for it. Compulsory integration requires that you be paid for that. If somebody does not want to participate in it, as Lindsay mentioned, is that by not executing a lease, you are preventing your property from being the property that's used to extract the gas. The extraction would have to take place on somebody else's piece of property, not yours. You can prevent that from happening by not signing a lease. But you can also prevent it by signing a lease that says you can't drill on my property. So that's another way to do that. So compulsory integration is here. It's been determined by the legislature that those valuable resources can be extracted. There's nothing that we can do about that portion of it, and that we are therefore here to discuss the issues of how to protect ourselves and make best use of that particular situation.
And how great a distance horizontally can they go from a drill?
From a structure, 200 feet, I believe.
Actually, first thing I'm going to say about horizontal drilling was developed because it's a much more efficient way to draw the gas out. So instead of having 30 wells in a 30 wells in a 640 acre parcel, you can have one well that can get all the gas out of that 640 acres. So that's where horizontal gas comes in. How far can they go? We hear up to 3,500 feet. Now, in New York State, with 640 acre units, one of the things the spacing, I was going to say this before, one of the things the new spacing unit did was change all these, so we won't have a patchwork of what we call non-conforming units. This new bill that was signed will make all the units what we call conforming, which puts them more almost in the shape, practically in the shape of a square. I mean, so they're all conforming, so we wouldn't have this patchwork. It makes it more efficient for everybody. And thus, they also, with these units, and I think Roberto mentioned this, there are buffers around those, so they can't, they only can horizontal drill up to the buffer to make sure they're not sucking gas out of anything beyond that unit boundary. And that is all tracked very carefully through the use of GPS and reviewed absolutely by DC. So there is protections there. So
well, I just want to say that I think I understand what you're saying, but to use a word like efficient is the language that only is being expressed from the side of the drilling companies. It is not efficient to the people who don't want that drilled, and that makes the difference.
I can certainly appreciate how you came to the reflection that you stated. One of the things when we were scoping out how to do this forum was how to keep it within a subject matter that we could do in a couple hours. And what we consciously decided was to try to focus on the landowner's rights from a consumer protection at this forum, recognizing that the Assembly Environmental Committee is going to focus on the environmental issues and that the DEC is going to be conducting hearings around the state on environmental issues. We wanted to give an opportunity here in Broome to focus on from a sort of a consumer protection issue. But your point is well taken. It was just sort of a, how do you do it within a time frame that an evening would provide? But I really do encourage you to, if you can't be there, get those statements to the Assembly Environmental Committee and participate to the extent you can in the DEC in the public hearing. So, well point. I appreciate it. Yes, sir.
I'm a small landowner in approximately 400 feet from a current well, and just this last spring they did frack that well. A comment approximately a month after that, we started having trouble with our water well. And we are still going through the process to try to get that resolved. And there's no way of tracking chemicals back to the fracking fluids. I appreciate that. So this is a very difficult thing that I think you all face, potentially, if you're really close to a well. The other thing is that I've heard you mention 600-acre units, and I'm seeing what are supposed to be plot development site plans that are showing only 40-acre units around wells. And I wonder what the difference is and how that relates to what we're doing.
Yeah, under the old law, the size of units was all based on the depth of the drill. Now, with the new law, what that does is it incorporates not only the depth, but the use of horizontal drilling. So what you're seeing right now, and I brought this up at the New York Conference of Mayors and Municipalities Forum, was that what we're seeing is a number of companies going in, because they still can drill vertical wells in shallow formations. So we're seeing companies come in and getting permits for 40-acre units for some of the shallower formations. And actually, Marcellus being can be one of the shallower. And what that does is it ties up landowners' leases for the commercial life of that well, as I mentioned earlier. And we have brought that to the attention of the DEC and some of our state legislators to look into that, because it's a ploy to be able to hold off until they can start horizontal drilling into Marcellus Shale by drilling these 40-acre units. Of course, 40 acres is the minimum unit allowed in New York State. So, and that's again based on the depth of the drill as to how small that is. So,
when they were discussing the titles and these leases and getting a lease off a title, suppose you happen to have purchased property that still has a lease on it, and then royalties come through. Does the person that originally signed the lease receive the royalties? And if they do, when it comes to the taxes, does the homeowner that now owns it pay the taxes, or would the person that received the royalties, if the lease, pay the taxes?
I think it's all a part of what your deal was when someone would buy that property. Did they buy the mineral rights or the gas rights? Did they buy the royalties? They would be responsible for taxes. And on top of that, that they should be able to contact the gas company to say, I'm now the owner of this particular royalty interest. So here's a copy of my deed. It shows that I'm the owner of this particular property, and start cutting the check to me.
Where can someone go around here to find an example of an existing well and a water holdover tank? That's the first part. And a compressor, just to see what it looks like, a holding tank to see, for the water, and to hear it. And the second part of the matter would be just to reflect on what this lady said. We were told by the landmen who came that if our property was sold, if we signed the lease and our property was sold, that the royalties would continue. The way they had set it up was that the royalties would continue to be sent to us as in the form of like a coupon, so to speak.
I'll handle the royalty part.
It would not go to the new owner.
I'll handle the royalty part of the issue, and it depends on the transaction when you're selling the property. Are you selling the property and the royalty interest with the property, or are you retaining the royalty interest? I've heard of instances where people sell their real property but retain the royalty interest for the minerals subsurface. That depends on the transaction. I mean, if you transfer the property and everything associated with the property to the new buyer, then the new buyer is the one that's entitled to get the royalties after the property is transferred. Lindsay, do you know contacting a gas company?
Locally, I don't know. No, I know probably, because they're currently drilling up in Shenango County, and, the DEC would be the obvious person to call and say, where are there active drillings going on? And the same with right across the border in Pennsylvania, DEP. I mean, I know a lot of people have been touring down to Pennsylvania to see wells. I personally, I could take you around Schuyler and Chemung County and show you all kinds of wells that are established. But, I can't keep track of where they're drilling them, currently. So there's a real nice one right between Corning and Watkins Glen, right on Route 414. There's a big cheese sign in front of it. the farmer no longer makes cheese. So,
I'm from Tioga County, as you know, Lindsay, and I'd like to kind of address the question to you, I think, because you're probably the best one to answer it. For some months, I've been looking into, is there any such thing as an environmentally friendly way to do drilling? And I think I've concluded from that the closed loop system allows for a way in which we can have the exploration of gas occur and at the same time get a 70 or 80% reduction in water usage, which is very important to us, and eliminate the fluid side of the waste product by separating the solids from the fluids being able to be used again in the next well. So it eliminates all that truck traffic on the highways and provides a way that it's a win-win. It's even cheaper for the company doing the drilling. I'd like to see DEC make that the law of the land. Have you got any comment?
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things that came up fairly immediately with this whole issue was, how can we, one of the ways is, look, how can we recycle on site? But certainly, those are all being looked at absolutely during this whole period right now. And certainly, again, anybody who's a member of Farm Bureau, Nick, I would encourage you to attend your county annual meeting in October and bring these resolutions forward. I think everybody's behind you, absolutely in theory, because it's proven itself out in other parts of the country also. So, Assemblywoman?
No, I would just add that that is absolutely something we're talking about, and part of those scoping hearings that we're going to be having here in Broome County and across the state are going to involve hearing from people like yourself about that. That's not a foreign idea, and it's something that we're actively looking at and talking to the industry about.
Thank you.
Okay.
Doug?
Yeah, I got a little information, maybe put some minds at ease. Some people want protection. Remember in your lease, no storage. You're thinking of storing gas, some people, they're just going to put gas down there, maybe I'll get paid for putting it down and bringing it back. Two faults. Number one, no one can ever drill there again if they put gas down. Number two, something else shows up. Like a permit to DEC, they want to store brine waters in that well. That's from the town of Binghamton, request to store wastewater in a well. That's why you have no storage. And I have to both give some praise to parts of New York State officials, and then on the other hand, I have to condemn them. Had they done what they should have 9-10 years ago, we wouldn't be in the position we are now with the wastewater. Our wastewater out of our wells goes where? To Pennsylvania to be treated. And sometimes the trucks are back too quick to go down there to be treated. I know because they came up and down my road. I'm convinced some of that went to a dry hole. We haven't yet even addressed, I don't know, I haven't heard of building some wastewater treatment plants here in New York State. Pennsylvania has 2 and is going to construct 2 more. We have to get on top of this. And sometime I want to talk to the assembly lady, about some of our politicians. I might open your eyes just a little bit.
I heard that the DEC will not issue permits unless they know what's in the fracking fluid. What I want to know is, will the DEC only know that, or will we all know that? And if we don't all know that, how do we test our water? Thank you.
That's a great point. It's come up before, and I would urge anybody to demand that, talk to your legislators, and again, anybody in Farm Bureau, policy development time, get that in there, because I think it should be, personally I'm with you about full public disclosure on that, though.
Make an interesting freedom of information law question. I guess I'm over on this side, if there is one, okay?
I have a question about the scoping meetings and the new regulations you're trying to enact. Will the companies that already have permits be held to these regulations, and do you have a freeze on permits at this time?
I didn't hear that last part.
Do you have a freeze on permits at this time?
Well,
No.
Lindsay, let Lindsay take the first part of that.
Yeah, what was the first part?
I mean the second, I'm sorry, the second part.
The new regulations will.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll do the permitting part. No, there is no freeze. The only freeze on any permit is for horizontal drilling in shallow formations. You know so there are still permitting. They still can drill horizontally in deep wells like Trent Black River, but they are still issuing vertical well permits.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, we're going to do everything we can moving forward, and it's difficult for wells that have already been drilled to have the new regs or the new approach applied. So, in a sense, it's prospective, but we're going to have to look at case-by-case basis. And some of those. Do you have a concern about something that's already happened?
No, I was just curious.
Yeah, but that will be a good point to raise as well. I'll make a note of that.
We did.
Oh, back here.
I'm from Delaware County, and this is the 4th landowners meeting I've been to. I'm looking forward to a meeting of renters and non-landowners and babies and grandchildren and all the people that are not represented here who want clean air, clean water, noise-free living now and in the future. I'm concerned about the DEC. They currently have 19 field representatives to do this inspection work. In their 2005 audit, they were chastised for not being able to monitor the gas drilling to date that's going on in their own land, on their own state land. I realize there are no DEC representatives here, but how are we supposed to trust that they will monitor the gas companies at every stage of the game to make sure that they encase the well properly, that they wait for the cement to harden, that they use the fluids that they're disclosing that they'll use, that we know what fluids are being used, et cetera, et cetera. I think we just have made this this gold rush mentality, and if we asked for other forms of energy to be developed, they would be developed, and there are much cleaner ways to supply energy.
Well, yeah.
Thank you.
You know, as you know, we have been talking about this as a transition fuel till we get to the cleaner, till we get to the alternative energy. I have been assured by DEC, and it's my job to stay on top of that they're only going to issue the number of permits that they're going to be actually able to manage and to oversee. Now, what I'm also going to be trying to do is to beef up that number at DEC. Obviously, you know, we've had budget cuts to all of the agencies, including the DEC, took a 10% cut. So we're not really getting to where you want us to be. So we're going to try to find some creative solutions to bring on additional staffing for DEC. But again, to go back to my original remark, they have assured me, at least Judith Enck has from the governor's office, who's the Deputy Secretary for the Environment, they're only going to be able to issue as many permits as they are going to be able to adequately monitor. So we're just going to have to keep them true to that as we go forward. But I know that's not a great comfort, I'm sure.
I'd like to know if New York State has incurred any bonds from the oil companies for damage to the infrastructures before they gave out drilling permits?
I'm not sure. You mean like we're trying to encourage the municipalities to do?
Performance bonds.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure. We know that.
I mean, other states
Sure.
have done this.
Yeah.
You know, they've got billions of dollars up front from the oil companies in case
Right.
there's any damage to the infrastructure.
No, I understand that. We've asked the DEC to review with us their leasing policies, how much they've been getting for the leasing rights. I understand that, how much they are being paid in royalties. And I don't know the answer to that question, but you're right. We should be doing the same thing on the state level.
This is not a thing that the DEC should be doing.
Sure.
It's Albany should be doing this, incurring a bond, holding this money in case they damage the infrastructure.
Are you talking about for each individual municipality?
Yes.
Oh, I thought you were talking about state roads, for state roads.
State,
yeah.
too.
I assume.
Before drilling permits were given out.
Gotcha.
Dennis in the back.
In the back. Thank you. First on the question of compulsory integration, and I'm addressing this to Assemblywoman Lupardo particularly, couldn't there be legislation that says that when there's compulsory integration, that the amount, rather than be based on some bottom line of 12% or something like that, be based on the average for the leases that were signed within that unit? So I'm putting that out as a suggestion for some legislation as to how to figure the royalty for those who are compulsory integrated, okay? I'm not asking you to respond to it, I'm just making a suggestion, okay? The other things I'd like to say is that that perhaps the Attorney General's office, for those of us who really either don't trust attorneys or can't afford attorneys, to put out a variety, perhaps half a dozen or so, kind of specimen leases to reflect various kinds of circumstances that people might have. Maybe 6, maybe more than 6. But anyhow, whatever number it takes to put out some leases where we can get them either online or we can contact the Attorney General's office for copies. So that's another suggestion. I'd like to point out as a matter of information that the same companies that are leasing up here are leasing in Texas and Louisiana for $30,000 up front an acre. The bonus is $30,000, and I'm sure that some of you on the platform will verify that, as well as 25% royalties. So it's something to consider that these companies, I was with Chesapeake, before I bought the property I now have, Chesapeake had it, I canceled the lease. But Chesapeake is down there paying $30,000. So please consider that there's more money there than meets the eye. Finally, there was a meeting in Delaware County, and I wish the lady hadn't left from Delaware County, over the problem of people suffering this coming winter with the fuel problem, that can't afford fuel. And what I'm suggesting is that that each county and perhaps the state look into saying to these oil companies, gas companies, that a certain amount of the what they take out of the ground should go directly to help the people of our counties in terms of their heating costs. That is, that perhaps there could be some kind of county legislation or state legislation that says that a certain proportion of what they take out of the ground, and after all, it's out of the ground throughout the county, not just for us landowners, that a certain portion of it go to NYSEG, who will in turn give us cheaper fuel, or perhaps some other plan. But anyhow, that some of that stay for the entire people of the population, not just us landowners. So those are some suggestions.
With regard to the compulsory integration issue, what the landowners get when they get compulsorily integrated is the higher of 1/8 or the lowest percentage that the other people in the unit who have leased have gotten. So if everybody in the unit gets 15% royalty, that's the lowest that an integrated person would get.
Yes, I have a statement I want to make, then I have a question. And the statement is with New York State losing population, with Broome County at one time being about 240,000, down to now 190 approximately, I think this news about the Marcellus Shale is the best news we could possibly receive. My question is the man brought up about different stratas of terrain, and when you get a permit like to drill, how do you cover all the stratas?
Actually, when DEC issues a permit to allow a gas operator to drill a well, they specifically give them a permit to drill a particular formation. They have to drill it, let's say that is formation number 10, they have to drill past formations 1 through 9, and they're only allowed to extract gas from formation number 10. So in that respect, even though when you sign your lease you may be giving away your mineral rights to all the formations, DEC only lets them get gas from one particular formation at a time.
I'm Dick Warner from Tioga County, and I have a question.
given this country's insatiable appetite for energy, I don't think I can envision a day when we're not going to see, a well in every direction spaced at about a mile apart. My question is, that means that any property owner will almost certainly be involved in a unit, whether they're there by lease or by compulsory integration, and receiving royalties from a well. And the question I have is, how do we know that the check that you get from the gas company accurately reflects what comes out of that hole in the ground? Who is monitoring the measuring and metering of this gas?
I got answers for all those. That's a good one. So, first thing I would say about your royalty, one of the things that can go in a lease is the right to audit, to be able to check numbers and make sure thing. Now, let's get down to the metering situation. In New York State, we have no regulation, no law, no whatever about anything to do with metering on these wells, period. Well, let me tell you. That's right. And it's interesting when I called Ag and Markets. When I called Ag and Markets a few years back and talked to the assistant director of weights and measures and brought this up to him, this is, I don't know, probably 5 or 6 years ago, and his answer to me was, when you find out more, let me know. The federal government just, I want to say early last year, now requires a meter on their bypass. Well, you understand in New York, there'll be a meter on the main well, but there's no meter on the bypass. The bypass is there, so if they have to do any maintenance or work on the main stem of the well with the main meter, they can do that. Interestingly enough, I sat in the president of Fortuna's office many years back, and we asked her, Asher asked her, how do you know what's going through that well when it's through the bypass? And she goes, well, we know about what goes through there. So that is certainly something we're looking at. The federal government now requires a meter on all their bypasses because they felt they lost somewhere between $7 and $10 billion in royalties over the last bunch of years. So that being said, one of the things we also have to look at is who monitors, who check those wells, because currently the gas companies themselves hire a private company to handle that for them. So again, that's something we. Well, yeah, well, that could be said for. I won't go any further with that comment because I'll get in trouble. But yeah, that is certainly something we've been looking at. We have policy on it, and we've been looking at it for years, and we have made no headway. So we're hoping that maybe during this period, that would be something else that we can get accomplished. So,
one question I'd like to ask, and it's back to landmen, and this question would be: when landmen and something we're seeing in our area is the gas companies are paying neighbors to go to neighbors and sign them up on leases. The neighbors don't know that those neighbors are being paid because there isn't any disclosure. There should be disclosure. Landmen should have disclosure laws the same as real estate agents or brokers have to have. And then the next question would be, how come these guys are doing real property leases and not being brokers or agents? When they come to my door and they're knocking on my door, a real estate agent has to be licensed. And they're under all these laws and regulations of what they have to disclose. Yet those guys can do anything. They're cowboys. They're out there doing whatever they want to do. I've had landowners who have approached other landowners and put their names down as the leasee and tried to get their neighbors to sign a lease. This isn't right, and this is something that should be being protected by our AG office. Something needs to be done. There should be some laws and rules that these guys have to follow.
Mike? And I don't disagree. The Attorney General's office doesn't make the laws, so as it currently exists now, there is not a regulation for registering or licensing any landmen in taking leases. So agreed, but it's because of the laws that require people who are real estate agents to get real estate licenses. There's nothing that in the law currently that says that landmen have to get real estate licenses.
You hit on a point, though, that concerns our office, because it is part of the standard of practice that we're looking for the industry to sign on to. And it seems like just basic disclosure. Who are you? Now, if you happen to be my neighbor and you're acting on behalf of somebody else, you think common courtesy would be, but the requirement is going to be on the industry and what we're looking for the industry to agree to. You come to the door, you're looking for a lease, you disclose who you are and who you're working for. I think your point is a valid point, whether it's in the law or not. It ought to be part of the industry, and that's part of the standard of practice that we think the industry ought to agree to, and we're going to be pushing them to do that. Good point. Yes.
Yes, this has this very similar happening here. It sounds like Nairi. We're going to have our lifestyles disrupted. Transmissions lines are going to be built, and this fuel or gas or oil is going to be piped someplace else to a bigger market. And as a man behind me said, is there any way that the towns, county, and municipalities can ensure that some of this is left here to benefit all the citizens that are going to be disrupted?
In terms of leaving some of the gas, there was a comment up in the bleachers about using some of the gas to help those who can't pay their bills, you know, for economic problems. You know, there are towns that have considered local ordinances in terms of protecting their roads, their infrastructure. Towns are wrestling with this. I know we've had a number of conversations with town supervisors, town boards over what to do this and to protect their community. You know, I don't have a simple answer for you. You know, is there right now there's no requirement that a percentage be given back to the community other than the property tax on these structures as it's devised right now is being paid by the companies. In that way, there's some money that comes back into the communities. But Lindsay?
Right, and another point with that is municipalities are just like any other landowner where they have to negotiate a lease. And you've seen the provisions in leases where people can get free gas or whatever. And there's certainly no reason why a municipality could not negotiate something along those lines, whether it be, you know, not necessarily free gas if we're talking a large quantity or whatever, but even for their buildings, whatever. But, you know, that's part of the leasing process. So in that situation, now what we can do further, you know, that's up to the legislature.
And just to chime in on that, the federal government does have something somewhat along those lines. They call it royalty in kind, where instead of getting the royalties in money, they get it in actual oil or natural gas. So that's also another possibility.
I think we're over on this side.
Okay, getting the gas out of the ground is one thing, but getting the gas to market is a whole new challenge. When it comes time to put these pipelines in, what protection is the landowner going to have then?
Roberto?
The first thing is you have to differentiate between a leased landowner and a non-leased landowner. If you're a leased landowner, like Mike mentioned, your lease is the book, is the beginning and the end of everything you have a right to. If you're an unleased landowner, nobody has a right to put a pipeline through your property without your consent. As far as state pipelines go, gathering pipelines, taking it from the well to market. I think I mentioned earlier that the New York State Department of Public Service issues the permit for the gathering pipelines. They have very strict guidelines in terms of safety concerns and environmental concerns for the way the pipeline is installed, the type of equipment that is used, and the type of restoration that goes into installing those gathering pipelines. So I would direct you to their website and their documents, which are also very useful there.